I spent some time with a group of CMOs last week. Here's what I shared with them, and here's what I heard. I always talk about AI as an operating system, where it's an operating system for how you personally work if you're using the tools. It's an operating system in how teams will work in the future, although nobody's quite figured that out. It's an operating system for how processes should operate. We're not thinking about it in those terms. And so what's happening is people are, being handed tools or handed trainings, and they don't really know how to evolve them into systems that weren't designed to support them, right? If I can write a white paper in a half an hour, if I can combine some deep research with writing and come up with a pretty damn good white paper in half an hour, if it takes you 6 days for your organization to review that, your processes probably haven't caught up. So what I heard from most organizations is that they're dealing with that issue right now. Maybe they've started to roll out AI. They don't really know how to deal with it as a team, but that's where everybody is. And don't let anybody tell you they've figured it out. Honestly, I don't believe anyone has, right? We have an AI native workflow at my company, and we haven't figured it out. Like, the workflow changes from week to week, but that's the fundamental change. That's sort of the foundation for everything that needs to change. The next stage is automation. And I always talk about, like, long term, you can't automate everything, because if everybody automates everything, then no one's automated, right? Like, it's where everybody's on the same page. But the more forward thinking organizations have found ways to do the simple automations that are coming through tools like N8N, through Zapier, figuring out what are some paths where we could actually find some shortcuts, right? Agents, not so much, right? Like it's like, I don't know. There's this fine line between talking about agents and automation, but those basic automations are kind of the first step for organizations to take to start to take advantage of the other benefits of these tools. Now, I also talk about AI as UX. I didn't hear anybody talking about that. Very few organizations are down this path, right? I look at the example of Descript, one of my favorite platforms for how they rolled this out, right? It's basically a natural language interface where if you use your software, you have to figure out how to get rid of the system that we have of buttons and blah, 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 right? Like, if you go to Microsoft PowerPoint and try to figure out how to do a slide transition, that'll tell you what's broken, right? If you go into Canva and say, I want to make a PowerPoint, great, it'll help you do it, right? Like, so they have these natural language interfaces. This is the future of all software. And so if you are in a software company and your software relies on old buttons and everything else, it's going to feel old very, very soon. The other part of this is your website. Like, there's a lot of talk about AEO, but it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that, because a website is essentially an exchange of value and an exchange of information, right? I'm going to your website to gain information or to gain value. The question organizations need to ask themselves is the value that your website delivers greater than or less than the value I can get from Claude or GPT or Gemini when I ask about your company? That's a very, very simple question, right? And very, very important one, because you have all these massive websites for all these companies with hundreds and hundreds of pages. Are they actually delivering value, or can I get that same value in ChatGPT? My favorite example of this, OpenAI. I actually find out more about OpenAI from asking Gemini than I can about ChatGPT, right? So there's this weird disparity out there, but you have to start thinking about that value. And then, of course, on the other side of it, like, most organizations have not really leaned into the world of creative AI, where I spend most of my time. As I told people, it's probably $1,000 to $2,000 per employee, right, to have all of the tools that I'm using right now per employee. So how many organizations are willing to invest $24,000 a year in employee experimentation, right, in some of these new tools, right? So there's a huge gap on the creative AI side, right? So that's why you're seeing, like, these super studios pop up out there, right, who basically have access to all of the tools, because not every organization is going to be able to make that investment in people. So in order to make the AI work, you have to invest in people, and you have to give them the software licenses that work. So we'll see where this group is in a year. It's always curious to kind of watch how this development has happened, right? I think it's one of those, suddenly then all at once. People will adopt it, right? Like, they'll get it and things will start clicking.